Okay, let's talk about fear. This is a biggie, okay? Because we all have fears, don't we? Fear of failure, fear of other people judging us, fear of self-judgment, fear of success. You may not believe it, but that actually does exist, fear of success. And the things that often debilitate us. I once read a quote from Jack Canfield, and Jack Canfield was the author of the Chicken Soup series of books, Chicken Soup for the Soul, etc. And he said, everything you want is on the other side of fear. So let's just think about that for a moment. Everything you want is on the other side of fear. I find that hard to argue with, isn't it? Because fear, those things like failure or embarrassment or all those things, are generally what stops us from doing something and taking action. Okay? They stop us from doing something we know, unless we know what the outcome's going to be. Okay? But of course, we can't control the outcome, so fear actually debilitates us and stops us. Okay? So we need to understand what is fear all about. Now, I again read an acronym once for fear, and it said this. It said fear really is false expectations appearing real. And that really is true, isn't it? Because very often in life, we're fearful of something and we ultimately do it and we go, that wasn't so bad. That wasn't as bad as what I thought it was going to be. And it's almost like the anticipation of the event is actually what the fear is. Okay? The anticipation is what actually stops us. Now, we need to learn to unpack that and understand that this is mostly likely to be the case. In fact, fear of something that you don't know about is actually an absolute waste of time. How often do we spend, how many moments do we spend in thought fearing an outcome of the future? Now, fear is another interesting thing because, let me ask you, does anybody out there procrastinate? That's all right, take your time, have a think about it. Yeah, we do procrastinate, don't we? So, procrastination is often because of fear. We don't want to do that. We don't want to make the phone call. We don't want to take that particular action. However, who's ever got to that moment where it's like, it's the last night before a paper's got to get put in, or I've got to make that phone call that I've been putting off for 3 weeks, and all of a sudden we become fearful of not taking action, don't we? The fear of not taking action is now much worse than the fear of taking action in the first place. So fear procrastinates us, but fear potentially is actually something we can use to drive us forward. And we can actually use it to leverage us to take action. So recognize your fear and actually go, you know what? I need to actually overcome that. If that's the worst thing that's going to happen, I need to actually drive through that, because chances are it's not going to be as bad as what I thought in the first place. But fear is the number one thing that stops us. It's an interesting thing. When I run workshops and I say, who sets goals? And you get about 20% of people put their hand up and say they set goals. And I go to the others, why don't you set goals? Do you know what the number one reason is? Fear. Fear that they might actually achieve them. Fear of making the commitment to themselves that they now actually have to move forward and they're going to judge themselves. Okay? That's what stops most people from even setting goals in the first place, is fear. So we need to master fear. Okay? You need to look at all your experiences in life and go, how many times have I been fearful of an event, yet when I've actually got to the point of doing it, it was never as bad as what I was going to thought about it was going to be. And what's the worst thing that can happen anyway? Maybe you got something wrong. Well, don't do it again. There's no such thing as failure. Every action you take gives you a result. If you don't like the result, just don't do the same thing again. So fear can actually teach you. And it's overcoming your fear, or what they might say, you've probably heard this one, you've got to get outside your comfort zone to learn. That's about overcoming fears. You've got to jump in to the unknown, because that's actually how we learn. When we live in fear, all it does is actually just strengthens the neural connection in our brain. So we have an event and we're fearful of it, and every time we think about it and every time we jump into that fear, that connection gets stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. So what happens is the fear actually builds up in time, and the fear builds larger and larger. Now, what we want to do is we want to actually create a new synaptic connection, which means the creation of a new thought and process in our brain. That means we have to step into the unknown. We have to actually experience something new, and then we create a new connection. And if we do that often enough, guess what? It breaks the old habits and whole behavior. So, fear can stop us, but fear, I can tell you, is an amazingly very strong driving force to get us the leverage to overcome what we want to achieve. So, don't be fearful. Let's just all move forward.